Okay. Is Dr. Champon in?
Yes, please. He's online.
Okay.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, Doc. How are you?
I'm good, Doc. And how are you too?
I'm fine. So, Bismarck, we are waiting for you to set the ball rolling.
Okay, madam. Good afternoon, everybody. We thank you for joining us this afternoon. This meeting, this seminar exactly is as part of our week-long celebration to talk about the awareness of forensic science and create more awareness about the program we have here. So, Madam Charlotte will be introducing our speaker for today, and then he's coming to talk about trace evidence and a whole lot. I want to take keen to whatever going to be discussed there. It will help us a lot. So, Madam, please. Hello, Madam.
My mic was off the whole time, sorry. Yes, so as I was saying, we are pleased to have Superintendent Dr. Lawrence Kofi Echampong to speak to us. And he is a medical doctor by profession. He also holds an MPhil in general forensics, an MBA in health management, and is currently a PhD candidate in forensic chemical pathology. At the Ghana Prisons Health Service, and he is also a member of the African Society of Forensic Medicine. He currently works at in Sawam, the Sawam prisons of the Ghana Prison Service. So we are very fortunate to have Dr. Superintendent Lawrence Kofi Echampong to speak with us today. So I'll leave. I don't know if I should go ahead to introduce the topic that he's going to speak to us on. So he will be speaking to us on forensic trace evidence, a significant evidence for effective harmonization of evidence-based forensic science practice in Africa, a holistic approach towards a safer Africa. That's a lot.
Soil from one environment to the other. That analysis alone is also as important as everything. And it has helped in a lot of cases. And it helps to corroborate with other evidences to bring justice to whom justice has been denied. Some other examples are gasoline, dust, blood spatter, and other body fluids that are in crime scene, but they are in minute concentrations or appearances. And all these things are so important when we are dealing with forensic trace evidence. So why is so important in forensic science? According to a principle in forensics that we call Lucas principle of exchange, okay, it says that to every contact there is transfer of evidences, okay, and trace evidence is transferable from one person to another and one object to another. So no matter what happened, when a person moves from point A to B, the person either picks or leaves something there. When he gets to point B, he leaves and also picks something there. Most of the time, it is not visible to the naked eye. However, with this awareness and with this presentation, you should now become aware that if you go to a scene of crime or where a crime has occurred and you do not see, it doesn't mean it is not there. Because some of these things can be traced in nature, and you have to have this awareness to be able to go and identify and collect them properly, preserve them, transfer them appropriately to the right lab for analysis for us to give you results. So how much material is transferred depends on the intensity of the contact. It depends on the duration of the contact and sometimes the type of surface of the contact. These transfers of these trace evidences can either be a direct or an indirect transfer, okay? Materials may be transferred from an object A to an object B. Example, you can have a hair that can be transferred from a dog on the clothes of a dog owner. Okay, for that matter, it is a direct transfer. You can have situations where you have indirect transfers, where it occurs when materials are transferred to an object which never originally came into contact with that material. And for instance, someone might commit a crime or might commit murder at point A. You pick some trace evidence, let's say hair, and move to the house. When he got to the house, he saw the daughter coming to hug him. When he hugged the daughter, he transferred, let's say, the hair of the victim onto the daughter. It doesn't mean the daughter was in the crime scene where the murder took place, but by virtue of the fact that she has come into contact with the perpetrator or the suspect, that hair of the victim has been transferred to the daughter. So in that case, it becomes an indirect transfer. So sometimes when you are looking for trace evidences, you might not find it on the victim, you might not find it on the suspect, but you can find it on another third party, or you can find it in a secondary crime scene. Hello, please, are you with me? Are we together? Are we together?
Yes, all correct, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we are together.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we are with you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Good.
Wonderful.
Good. So, okay, thank you. So we will move on. So as I've said, it can be a direct transfer of this trace evidence or an indirect transfer of such a trace evidence. And for now, we know some examples of the trace evidences. We know how they can be transferred. And we know in terms of how these trace evidence can stay on an object, it depends on certain factors: the intensity, the duration, and the type of surface. It can be a single contact, and definitely there will be some level of trace evidence there. So The duration in which the evidence will actually remain in a location before it is further transferred or degraded or collected as an evidence is normally what we term as the persistence of a trace evidence. Because someone will ask, how long can a trace evidence stay at a particular crime scene? Okay, and that is the persistence. And the persistence would depend on a number of conditions. Example, the type of trace evidence we are dealing with, the location, the environment surrounding the evidence, and the time from transfer to collection. These are very, very important things when we are talking about trace evidence. You need to understand that trace evidence, some of them, when they are there, they can easily be removed. So that is why this aspect of trace evidence is very, very important when we talk about persistence. Because you should know as a forensic expert that your timely arrival in a crime scene is as important as anything. And we need to make sure the time of arrival as expert, sometimes and most of the time, as an expert, you need to be in the crime scene to collect the evidence. Sometimes we let the crime scene waste away before we get to the crime scene. You might have certain trace evidence being missing because the persistence of these trace evidence depends on the type, the location, the environmental situations and the surroundings, and the time from transfer to collection. So how do we look at the types of these evidences? Okay, these evidences can either be class evidence, we group it as class evidence, or individual evidence. So you can have a trace evidence that will be associated with a general group. Okay, and for instance, you can have someone who is wearing a size 7 Nike sneaker. A size 7 printed Nike sneaker might be a lot in the world. So at this point, if you are going to look for that, you are going to look for it in a broader form. Okay, but we can also consider it as individual evidence. Okay, individual evidence. That is when you'll be looking at the specificity. So for instance, if we find a little blood in a crime scene, we want to do the DNA to go into detail to be able to identify the person who committed this crime. So at this point, I would like us to now appreciate that if you want to collect trace evidence in any crime scene, it is very, very important in terms of its collection and preservation. Because most of them are light, they are minute, they are not something you easily see with your naked eye. Sometimes we use vacuums to collect them in the form of
Have you joined? Join, let me see, Saba.
this very well, using vacuum, using tape lip, using picking them, sometimes combing, scraping surfaces, collecting them in the appropriate packages in the form of paper bags, in the form of sample bottles, depending on their state, and making sure that you do not denature any form of anything when it comes to certain trace evidence you need to collect. After collecting them, they have to be analyzed and identified. And the identification process deals with both comparison of physical and chemical properties. And we look at the probability that each piece piece of evidence could actually be present. So as experts, as students who are in the field of forensics, you do not leave any stone unturned when you are in your crime scene. You do not imagine what is there, what is not there. You just have to let the school you have gone, and with that, we look at both physical and chemical properties. For instance, we can consider the use of hair as a trace evidence. First of all, when we pick hair, we can just look at it and know that this is hair. But we need to be able to distinguish whether this is a human hair or an animal hair. And we have to go and look at its physical properties in the microscope. When we look at it, there are certain characteristics that makes it either a human or an animal hair. Then we can go ahead to look at its chemical properties. Then we can move on to identify whom the hair belongs to. And one interesting area is that now we are doing both nuclear and mitochondrial DNA with hair. It's used to be propounded most of the time, in fact, in a lot of research work. We used to use the human hair to do mitochondrial DNA instead of nuclear DNA. And mitochondrial DNA is more maternal as compared to paternal. However, now research works have been able to have a breakthrough, and we can use the hair strand without the follicle to do nuclear DNA. In time past, most crimes, especially crimes involving sexual violence, where people get into defilement and rape, there is the tendency that through the struggle, the hair of the lady might be pulled, or the hair of the man or the people in the act might be pulled one way or the other. That can even be found under the fingernails, even on the beddings, on the surroundings, or even on the victim or the perpetrator, and it can be tested. And most of the time, you might not have the base of the hair, which is inside the skin, attached to the hair strand. So for that, if you don't have that follicle there, you might not be able to do the nuclear DNA. But now research has had the breakthrough of even using the hair strand alone to do both nuclear and mitochondrial DNA. And this is enormous and is huge when it comes to trace evidence. Are we together? Are you with me? Eunice, Thelma?
We are together. We are together.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Good. So I think, please, I'm on the previous slide, so you can go to the previous slide. I'm now coming to the next one. Okay. So it is very, very important for us to appreciate the identification of trace evidence in terms of comparison of the physical properties and comparing the chemical properties as well. And always, as the statement has been made, look at the probability that each piece of evidence could be present when you get into any crime scene. That is why this course or this lecture is very, very important for every forensic expert. You should know that it is there. You have to have the mindset that it is there, and you actively search for it. If you are not aware that these minute evidences are so important, you might not actively look for them. So, for instance, some trace evidence like paint, we do physical analysis of the color, physical match of broken edges, okay, number of matching layers. Then we go on to check the chemical analysis that deals with solubility test. We determine the type of paint, oil-based, water-based, acrylic, or latex. Then we analyze the chemical makeup of the paint. I must say that When we talk about trace evidence, all the types of evidences I have mentioned to you are discussed in a whole about a lot of credit hours when you take each of them, because we need to go into detail into each of these trace evidence, and it will marvel you how amazing it is for you to use some of these minute evidences to help you to give justice to whom justice has been denied. There are a lot of cases. We give you case scenarios of how these trace evidences have been used to bring justice and to also to bring people to book, and people who might have gone scot-free in the past. Some of these evidences have been used to bring them back to book. So I must say that paint as a trace evidence is actually something that is huge. We discuss it, we look at the color, we look at the physical analysis, the properties of paint, we look at the types of paint, we look at the base of the paint, we do the chemical analysis of the paint, and we will let paints and how they feel, how they are. And when you pick it in a crime scene, how it will let you be able to trace back to the one who committed that crime or where the crime occurred. Some aspect of blood spatter. It can be fingerprint, it can be hair. And as demonstrated in the next slide, you see that you can have, this is visible. However, you can have some hair strand in that blood and you might have to pick it. You might have imprinted fingerprints and you need to also latent or visible, depending on how to actually enhance some of these evidences for them to be seen. As I mentioned earlier on, the glass is a whole area in forensics. Okay, when you are talking about trace evidences, we will look at the matching pieces, you look at the surface material, whether it's a tinting films, it's labels, it's painted, the color. We look at the refractive index, the ability of the glass to bend to light. Okay, we look at all these things and the density. All these analyses are done on glasses, and we have different types of glasses with different makes. So depending on the glass that is involved, it helps us to trace, possibly if it is a car, what type of car, when it was made, what type of glass that it was, and when and who bought it, and who is using it. Okay, so it's very, very important when we talk about these evidences. Soil, we do the analysis aside the physical properties, we do the analysis of the pH, we look at the types of soil and the sizes of the particles. I must say that there are numerous of cases that has happened in time past. And as a matter of fact, some of these trace evidences has been the sole evidence that corroborated with other circumstantial evidences and direct evidences for the case to be adjudicated. And for that matter, it is very, very important for all of us, experts, to come to terms with actually what we have seen today and what we have heard today, so that whenever we are dealing with evidences, we do not forget trace evidences. Trace evidences are analyzed by equipment. Some of the equipment that we use in the analysis of these trace evidence could be stereo microscopes, we use compound microscopes, we use comparison microscopes, we have scanners that are used to filter paint to evidence. methods to be able to determine some substances as well. Hello, please are we together? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you all right.
We can hear you.
Yeah. Please, can you hear me? Good, good. I think I have some people whose hands are on.
Please.
Yes, Doc.
Yes.
Dr. Charlotte.
I raised my hand because of the time.
Yes, we are
We
almost
have
done.
about 5 minutes to go.
5 minutes. Sure. I'm just about to round up. Thank you very much, Dr. Charlotte. Good. So these are some of the equipment that we use when we are dealing with trace evidences. So I must say that there are some challenges when it comes to trace evidence. Most of these samples are very similar because most of the materials are made through mass production, especially with fibers, and sometimes we need tight quality control in factories, and that means there is little variations in terms of the clothes that we wear. Then the mobility of criminals makes it difficult to trace the evidence back to a specific source. Sometimes some of these trace evidences, because of the mobility, sometimes, as I said, the persistence of these trace evidences, if not collected in time, can have an issue. So the question to ask about trace evidence is, what type of trace evidence are we dealing with? Is it man-made or is natural? Where is it from? Is it an animal hair or a human hair? How common is it? Okay, are we dealing with fibers? Is it a cotton, cloth, etc.? And can it be identified to a single source? Yes. Is it human hair that we can determine mitochondria or nuclear DNA? Yes. So it is so important for us to know, because trace evidence gives us more than just evidence, but it gives us addition to other evidences. It can be used to reconstruct the crime scene. It can place a suspect at the scene of a crime. And it has been used to gain a lot of acquittals. And it gives a clear and accurate expert opinions and report writing. So the recommendation is, as students and as experts, when you are dealing with crimes, you should and must know that you shouldn't be oblivion of the minute evidence, which we call trace evidence, that are not visible to the naked eye. And it is very important to guide our knowledge in trace evidence, to identify the unseen evidences with the right technique, for us to include the discussion of trace evidences in any aspect of our training curriculum. So at the end of my presentation, I've been able to introduce to you why there is the need for you to get this knowledge as students and as experts. I've been able to define to you what trace evidence is, which deals with minute evidence in size. It can be adhered to the victim, the perpetrator, or it can be in the environment. I've given you examples of these trace evidence as hair, fiber, paint, glass, soil, etc., etc. I've been able to take you into the realm of Locust's exchange principle, where if you cannot see something in the crime scene, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And you should know that the intensity of the contact, the duration, and the type of surface influences the transfer of direct evidence, of trace evidence. Trace evidence can be transferred either directly or indirectly. And the persistence of trace evidence is as important as ever, because it helps you to know that you have to respond as a forensic expert or student in time to preserve it. And trace evidence can either be in a class form or an individualized form. And it has to be collected specifically and preserved with certain instruments for you to go into the physical and the chemical properties. I've been able to mention human hair, the paint, the blood, the glass, the soil to you as some of the typical trace evidence that you need to bear in mind and their physical and chemical properties. I've mentioned to you some equipment we use for analysis and some challenges and the reason why this presentation is so important. So at the end of this presentation, I want to tell you that you need to gain this knowledge in trace evidence to identify the unseen evidence with the right technique. Thank you very much, and thank you for your audience. Over, Dr. Charlotte. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Champo. It's great food for thought.
Thank you so
Are
much.
there any questions? Dora Diasa, Diasi, your hand has been up for a long time. I don't know if it's with respect to a question or it's something else. So if it's not, then kindly lower your hand. If you have any question, kindly raise your hand. Dr. Bania will moderate the question time. Okay, so Dr. Bania.
Yes, madam. So I would want to pick my first.
Yes,
Yes.
take over with the.
Yes. Thank you very much for your presentation, sir. We are grateful for your time. But I have one question I was even trying to type. And my question goes like this. Can you give us a case in which your office used this practice to solve? Was there any case of